This video is sponsored by Squarespace. Pesto takes a long time to make using traditional techniques, but the flavour is like nothing I've ever tasted when it's made this way. And for most people, this is a problem, because everyone wants to eat great tasting pesto, but no one wants to spend 30 minutes making it. So today I'm going to share a traditional pesto recipe with you that I got taught many years ago. Then I'm going to adapt that method to work using modern equipment to make the whole process easier and faster. But the big question is, will it be any good compared with the traditional method? So let's get into it. I like to start with the pine nuts. I toast them to get the most out of their flavour, and for another important reason, but I'll explain more about that in a moment. So you can either do these on a tray in the oven or in a frying pan like I am. I prefer the frying pan because it's easier for me to not forget about them and burn them, but either way works well. So whilst they're toasting, I can get on with prepping the garlic. It's as simple as peeling it, placing it in the pestle and mortar with a little salt and crushing it into a paste. Like this. Back to the pine nuts and they're ready. They've got a light golden toasting and they smell great. The second reason I like to toast pine nuts is to use the heat stored up in the nut to cook the garlic. So I just pour most of them in with the garlic and I save a few pine nuts to the side for later. And then I just crush those hot pine nuts, and what's happening is it's taking that raw edge off the garlic by very gently cooking it and rounding it out. It's an incredible smell. Okay, so next up the main ingredient, the basil. Here I've got 120 grams of picked basil leaves. There's some of the younger, smaller stems in here, but all of the large fibrous ones have been removed. So the first step, I'm just filling the pestle and mortar up to the top with leaves. And I'm tearing some of the larger ones just to help speed up the process a little. Then I just start bashing. The idea of making pesto like this is to bruise the basil, to bring out all of its natural oils, flavours and fragrances. And this can feel counterintuitive at first, because herbs are generally something you're trying not to bruise in order to keep their fresh flavour. That's why I love learning recipes like this, because it teaches you so much about how different ingredients work in different ways. Okay, so once I've got that first round of basil well bashed down, I can add a second round of leaves and just repeat that process. It's good to work in stages with the basil. If you just try and chuck everything in at once, it'll make your life much harder because the process is a lot slower and it's a lot more frustrating. I'm sharing this traditional pestle and mortar process first because I think it's vital to understand this traditional method, because I think the time and patience is the most important ingredient here. But I think we can get a strong 8 out of 10 using the food processor, and that's going to be good enough for most occasions. Whilst I'm bashing and bruising the basil, a quick word from today's sponsor. This video is sponsored by Squarespace. Squarespace is the all-in-one website platform that's built to help you succeed online. Whether you're launching a new venture or expanding an existing one, Squarespace equips you with everything you need. From securing a domain to creating a polished website that highlights your offerings. For me personally, the next step in my business will be communicating with my audience more. And email is a great way to do this. But like all small business owners, I'm juggling 20 things at once. And adding one more thing to that long list of to-dos is a little bit daunting. But Squarespace email campaigns make it easy to connect with my audience, promote what I do, and grow my reach. All while using well-designed templates that blend seamlessly with my website's design. Another avenue I'll be exploring more will be an online store. So whether I'm offering services, selling goods, or doing both, Squarespace has all the tools that I need to scale and earn, all from one central hub. With streamlined payment processing and integrated tools for managing inventory, shipping, and order fulfillment, I can deliver a smooth experience for both me and my customers. Head to squarespace.com/Ben Goshawk to save 10% off your first purchase. Off of a website or domain using the code Ben Goshawk. Okay, all the basil is in. I've been bashing for a good 15 minutes and it's really starting to break down. It smells fragrant and rounded. I'm ready for the next step. I'm going in with around 40 grams of grated Parmigiano Reggiano, and I'm going to continue bashing that to really incorporate the cheese, just for a minute or two. Like a lot of Mediterranean recipes, this recipe leans a lot on the quality of the ingredients. So a 24-month aged Parmesan will give you the punchy flavour you're looking for with a pesto. Now I've got a thick green paste, but it's not quite looking like pesto, so it's time for the oil. I'm using a good fruity extra virgin olive oil. And this step is somewhere where you want to tread carefully, because you can end up making your pesto bitter if you use an olive oil that's got an overly bitter taste. So, if you've got options for your olive oil, great, go with something light and fruity like me. If you haven't, then think about diluting your bitter tasting olive oil with something that tastes a little more neutral. My Italian friends will disagree with me on this, I know, but not everyone has access to a wide range of great olive oil. So instead of making a bitter tasting pesto, just to rigidly stick to tradition, you can dilute your extra virgin olive oil with something like a neutral tasting avocado oil. Now, I've only added around 80 millilitres. I like to keep my pesto very thick at this stage. This will help with storage and it'll all become clear in a minute. Then lastly, the whole pine nuts that I saved from earlier. This is optional, but it adds a much needed alternative texture to something that's otherwise just a fine paste. Okay, so that's as far as I like to take my pesto in this stage. It does still need to be finished, but I'll do that when I want to eat it. Once again, this is to do with storing it, and I'll explain more in a minute. Think of this as a pesto base. We've done 95% of the work, we just need to do the final 5% of fine tuning to bring out 100% of its flavours. So, first things first, we've got to talk about the exciting topic of food processor size. Don't click away because this is actually really important. You see, the thing with average sized food processors like this one, and making a household amount of anything like curry paste, hummus and pesto, is all the ingredients just stick to the sides. And this gets really annoying really quickly. So from these two food processors, I'm going to go with the small one. It's so much easier to work with, which you'll see throughout this quick demonstration. So I've got my pine nuts gently toasting in the pan behind me. I'm adding 1 clove of garlic, a little salt, and blending that until it's broken down. I won't be able to get it into a fine paste like the pestle and mortar, but this will have to do. Next, I'm adding the hot toasted pine nuts, saving a few to the side for later, then blending that into the garlic. I've got the same cooked garlic nutty smell that I got in the traditional recipe, so I'm happy with this method so far. Now I'm adding the basil, so I'm just filling up the container as much as possible without cramming it too much, and then processing that until it's all broken down. Then repeating that process until all the basil has gone. This part of the recipe is a bit fiddly, and I'm having to take the food processor apart a few times and mixing everything around to get everything breaking down evenly. But I'm reminding myself this is a lot easier and quicker than using the pestle and mortar. So after 4 rounds through the food processor, I've got this thick green paste. It's a lot greener than the traditional version, and the basil has broken down a lot more. So now I can add the cheese. And from here, I'm going to use a spoon, because I think this mixture is getting too thick for the food processor motor to handle. But for some reason, I'm choosing to use a teaspoon, and I don't know why I did this. Once the cheese is mixed in, I can go with my olive oil, roughly the same quantities as before. And finally, the rest of the whole toasted pine nuts. So now I've got both of these pestos at the same stage, 95% completed. The traditional method took me around 30 minutes, and the food processor version came in at less than 10 minutes. So there's a big difference in time. But how do they taste? The traditional one has a deep, rounded flavour. For me, it's a 9 out of 10. The only thing that could improve it would be some fresh picked basil straight from the garden, some super fresh pine nuts, and a really special local extra virgin olive oil. The food processor version has a more basil forward flavour. It's slightly fresher and more fragrant in a weird way, but it's not a bad thing at all. For me, it's a strong 8 out of 10. I do prefer the taste from the traditional method, but I'm a big fan of the time saving from the modern method. So if I'm just going for a weeknight meal, but I want a fresh homemade pesto, I'm using the food processor version without a doubt. However you look at it, both of them are 10 times better than anything you can get from a store. Before I show you how to get them ready to eat, we need to talk about storage. So there's 2 ways I like to store pesto. The first is just to place it in a small container, crucially smoothing down the surface with the back of a spoon, and then pour enough olive oil over the top to create an airtight barrier. This will last for 3 days in the fridge before you start seeing any serious deterioration, and that usually starts with the pesto losing its vibrant colour. The second is simply freezing it. Pesto freezes really well if you use a minimal amount of oil for the base recipe like I have, and it will last for up to 3 months before you start seeing any noticeable loss in flavour. Now to show you how I finish this pesto, let's make some pasta. So I just take what I need from the base recipe, roughly a heaped dessert spoon per portion. This is where I finish adding my oil to get to more of a pesto-like consistency, a little more salt, some cracked black pepper, and probably the most important ingredient that's also one of the most controversial, a few drops of lemon juice. For me, this brings out all of the flavours of pesto. The idea is not to taste the lemon, the idea is to enhance all of the other flavours. But the lemon can't be in with the basil for too long. That's why this step has to be done essentially when you want to eat the pesto. So that's why I like to think of a pesto recipe in 2 stages. The base stage that we got to a minute ago, where 95% of the work is done, then this final 5% of tweaking to unlock all of the flavours and fragrances. So here on the stovetop, I've got 2 portions of pasta cooking, and I'm placing the pesto into a cold frying pan. Then once the pasta is 90% cooked through, spooning on top of the pesto into the cold pan. I'm not worried about any water getting in there, I want it. I'm adding a dash more pasta water to really prove this point, and placing that pan onto a medium-ish heat, and then stirring, but preferably tossing, the pasta and pesto together, until it starts to become an emulsified sauce. Be careful with the heat under the pan at this stage. That's why I said medium-ish. It needs to be hot enough to heat the pan and gently cook the pasta, but not so hot that it makes the cheese in the pesto stick to the bottom of the pan, or potentially split. So it's a bit of a balancing act. After 30 seconds to a minute, the pesto, pasta and pasta water have all become one, and this looks great. I've had a lot of requests for a pasta-focused video. Drop me a comment down below if you'd like to see this, and let me know what problems you're facing when cooking pasta. Is it the flavour, the sauces, the texture, the timings? Or are you just generally unhappy with your current recipes and you want to take your pasta to the next level? 1 heaped dessert spoon of pesto is more than enough per portion. Don't fall into the trap that everyone falls into and think you've got to add half a kilo of pesto to coat your pasta. The pasta water is the vehicle that does this. If you enjoyed this video, then YouTube thinks you'll enjoy this one as well, so go check it out next.